And she really is just operating out of fear. And when you operate out of fear, you're going to hurt people. There's just no way around it.
Where are the quiet gays? Where are the quiet gays supposed to go?
I absolutely love this book.
Oh my gosh, me too.
I even like subscribed to this website called Super Summary that gives like chapter by chapter analysis and like character analysis and themes. I'll give you the login. But it was like, and it gave like cultural context. It was like $30 for the whole year. So, oh yeah, you did research, didn't you?
Girl.
Oh my God.
Down a rabbit hole.
Haylie?
Oh, I should put my microphone actually to my mouth. It was like facing the window.
Can you hear me better? So much better.
But I went down a rabbit hole about the 50s in America and McCarthyism and the Red Scare and the Lavender Scare. And my gosh, were we a mess?
Oh my God, there's so much. So you know that I'm like an avid history podcast listener. So yeah, I like had all the context for this, especially like the Lavender Scare. I also like love queer history. So like the Lavender Scare and why like queers like not love the color lavender, but like how it's used to like flag and like all these things. I guess I like won't bring up Taylor Swift's Lavender Haze song or music video, but I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna bring that up, but whatever.
As you bring it up.
I have to bring it up to say that I'm not gonna bring it up. Because it's a whole thing, but whatever. But yeah, the Lavender Scare and the Red Scare and like the Korean War and the Cold War and like all of that factors into this book, and it's like, whew, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And I like love Lily. I love her. And I love Kath. And I like just, oh my God. And I like hate Shirley and hate Will. And there's just like so many people that I like want to talk about.
I want to give Lily and Kath hugs. And I think, okay, here's what I think about Shirley.
Okay.
I think that pretty much every girl probably has a Shirley friend in high school.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I actually have a lot of empathy for Shirley because I think that she is also like in her own right really struggling to find her way and probably also just really wants like approval and wants to do well and be who she's supposed to be, but she is not really sure how to achieve that other than this like one very specific path that she sees and has seen other people achieve. And like in her mind, it's this ideal, in her case, like good Chinese girl who is going to win this pageant and then be a good wife and all of these things. And like, and it's kind of like the pick-me girl scenario where she kind of feels like she has to put other girls down in order to raise herself up.
Yeah.
And I think she will grow out of that because I think that most women do. And like I think a lot of these women look back on themselves in high school and feel really cringy and embarrassed about how they were and how they treated other people.
Yeah.
And she probably will eventually feel that as well. And so I feel for her in that regard, but I also feel exactly what you're saying is like, I hate the way that she makes Lily feel along the way.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't fault her for going down the path set out for her, especially like within that culture and the time. Like, I don't fault her for being like, this is what's going to keep me safe. You know what I mean? And I'm sure we'll get into it more, but like, yeah, to me, I just like love getting into books and being like, no, I'm staunchly behind this character. And like anyone, they like become my little like baby where I'm just like, I just feel for you. And I like, obviously she's the protagonist. It's what you're supposed to do. And so when Lily is just like, Shirley and her mom, man, I'm just like, ah. And even Judy at some points, I'm like, who I think is supposed to be like not a heroine character, but like somebody who's more so on Lily's side. Still, I have like problems with Lover. Don't get me wrong. For some reason, I pictured her as like Phoebe from Friends. I don't know why. I don't know why. Because first of all, Phoebe's white, but like her like energy of like being kind of different and like an outlier. I like that's what I thought of. But anyway, all this about all the characters. We haven't even like started the podcast technically.
That's really interesting because now that you say that, I hadn't realized the way that I was picturing Judy. There wasn't ever a face to her in my mind.
Okay.
But like the energy that she's giving, I think I was associating her with one of my aunts.
Oh. Wait, the lesbian aunt?
No. No, not that one. So my dad's sister, who is, I think maybe I've talked to you about her before, but she is like she's such a badass.
This is the one that you like love, like obsessed with?
Yeah, I want to grow up to be her.
Yes.
She's so cool. Like she's literally so cool. Like she goes on hikes and she owns a business and she's just like the coolest woman. She has a great sense of style. She just
love that.
Does things like makes jewelry and then is like, okay, yeah, cool, I did that. And now it's time to do something else. And she does races and like I don't know, she's just the coolest woman and obviously that's not the Judy character, but the energy that she's giving and like the understanding that she tries to have for Lily, even though she's not the same as Lily, she doesn't understand, but she's like, oh, I want to try and understand you and I want you to know that and like I'm here for you and I'm different from these people. In like a way that I don't really know myself. Not that she doesn't know herself, but like she herself doesn't know like why she feels different too. But she does. And so she relates to Lily in that way. And I think I was associating that energy with my aunt and just that like comfort. Yeah. And the comfort that I think that Lily is like sort of getting from that aunt as well. I don't know. I loved her so much.
Now I'm like thinking about Judy Hopps in Zootopia. I don't know why. My brain is like so scrambled everywhere. But yeah, Judy is a great character. I want to like talk about her a lot because I feel like at the end, I was like a little bit disappointed in Judy, but at the same time, like we're looking at it from like 2024 and we're like in the 1950s, you know? So yeah. And then I have like a somewhat of a problem, but then I read more. And so I'm like, kind of get it with the ending of the book, not the epilogue, but like the last chapter and the last like few paragraphs. I'm like, but why? Like there's just a key thing in there that I'm like, want to talk about, but obviously that's like 2 hours from now.
Oh yeah, maybe we should say what book we're talking about. We can edit it into the beginning.
No, it's fine. It's in the title of the episode, so I feel like, and we told people what we were talking about next. I love it. Welcome back, everyone, to Lesbian Book Club 10 minutes later. We read last night at the Telegraph Club. It's by Melinda Lowe, and it's about a young girl, Lily, who did I say her name right? I listened to the audiobook, but they don't ever say like her last name. And I'm like, it has to be H-U is who, right?
It is H-U, yeah.
Yeah. So Lily, and she is living in Chinatown in San Francisco in the 1950s, which is like smack dab in the middle of, you know, the Cold War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, like all these all these wars that were fought on like Asian soil. And she's just coming to terms with like who she is, her like intersectionality of her identities, being obviously like a first generation Chinese immigrant, and now then figuring out her sexuality. We just go down this whole journey with her and the people in her lives and how they react to her, which I'm obviously you guys already know because we just talked about it for like 10 minutes before we even introduce the book. But yeah, I'm super excited to dive into this. I feel like it might be a bit long, so we'll probably break this up into two. Sorry, everyone, but it'll be good, I promise, because obviously the back end of the book, if you read this, gets like juicy. So,
and we aren't the only people that loved this book because it got so many awards. It
I
was
know.
awarded with the most notably there were so many awards that it got, but most notably the Stonewall Book Award, the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, New York Times bestseller, Youth Literature Award winner, National Book Award winner, and the Michael L. Prince Honor Book. So obviously, really important piece of literature.
Yes.
So I'm really excited to talk about it.
I know. And I want to shout out my local bookstore, which is called The Open Book, Simi Valley, which is where I live. Don't come here. It's not great, guys. But the bookstore is really great. I love their Instagram account. I'll link it in the show notes, but they did a queer book club and they did this book. And it was funny because their content on Instagram is like really funny. And I was like DM'd them from our TikTok account a while ago. And I was like, who is running this account? And they responded, they're like 4 bisexual women. And I was like, oh, of course it is, because the content was like fire. It's so funny. But that's where I first heard about this book. Where did you hear about this book, Haylie?
I have seen it just popping up around for like a couple years now. And then actually when we had Riley on a couple episodes ago, Riley was talking about gosh, what the heck is that app called?
Storygraph.
Storygraph. Riley was talking about Storygraph, and I have like absolutely gotten addicted to Storygraph. And one of its features is that it gives you recommendations, and I have gone down the list of hundreds of books and read descriptions of so many books, and I now have like a really highly curated TBR and put this on it. So
yeah, Haylie just sends me like a screenshot of her TBR and is like, which book should we do next? And I'm like, whichever one you so fancy, Haylie. We're like the same person at this point, so choose a way.
It's out of control, honestly. I like check it like it's social media. I look at all my graphs and I'm like, ooh, what am I reading these days, guys?
Oh my God.
Yeah,
I can see you doing that, just like on your phone, just like checking book data.
I do. Yeah. People think I'm doing something important and I'm like, yeah, like, I'm just checking the stock market. Yeah, I'm making money and investing.
I'm making money
in the banks.
In the banking system.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's really funny. Okay, anyway, this book is broken up into 6 different parts. And so here we go. Let's start with part 1, which is part 1, I Can Dream, Can't I? August through September of 1954. This is actually the prologue. So here we go.
We have Lily and Shirley. And Shirley is Lily's best friend.
Yes.
And we are introduced to the pageant, which will become important later on in this book. But the Miss Chinatown pageant it started because the people of Chinatown are trying to show that they are good American citizens, which some historical context here. That was important for them because in the Red Scare, there were a lot of scary things happening to them, like deportations or threatening of deportations, papers getting taken away, their jobs getting taken away, stuff like that, because they were getting accused of being communists. Because communist China was a threat to the United States, or a perceived threat. Senator McCarthy was he started a big political witch hunt against communists. And obviously, if you looked Chinese, then you were going to be a bigger target. So,
And by looking Chinese, what the government saw was like, if you're Asian, you are Chinese. Just like previously in like World War II, if you were Asian, you were Japanese. And it just led to a lot of like discrimination and targeting from the government. It was just, it's a horrible time just all around for Asian Americans, immigrants, and those who had been here for a significant amount of time. It didn't matter. There was no differentiation in the eyes of like the Red Scare and the government at this point.
yeah. And just to say this, like there wasn't any legitimacy to this.
No. Yeah.
McCarthy actually, like he came forward saying that he had a list of communists, and he said a certain number, and this number on his list kept changing. So they were like, oh, okay. And so can we see this list? And he actually wouldn't show who was on the list. And then as the number keeps changing, he finally shows the list, and it turns out that a lot of these people were actually not communists at all, and a lot of them were actually accused of being, as they would say at the time, homosexual. And that was important because this will also just give some further context to this time in this book, of why it was so scary to be gay at this time too. Was that if you were gay, then they thought that you were more likely to be able to be blackmailed and by the communists. And so if you were found to be gay, you're going to be fired from any federal government job.
Yep.
Or just government jobs in general. So,
and it was also seen as like being less loyal, like because you're like perverted, you're also not going to be as loyal. So it'd be easy to like flip gay people in the government. It was just like a whole lot of nonsense born out of like fear mongering and like scapegoating.
Right. Yeah. Like if you're willing to break that rule, then what other rules are you willing to break?
Exactly.
Yeah. So this list, it proves to be just like entirely non-legitimate. He says that they're card-carrying members of the communist organization, Communist Party. None of these people are actually card-carrying members, which also, why would you be carrying a card that identifies you as a member of this party that is like actively getting in trouble and in prison, and all these things, right? So anyway, he's leading this political witch hunt that is the driver of the Red Scare in the United States, and the media is actually the one that like kind of went into these accusations and proved them to be false. He never reacted or replied to these things, and then he would simply make new accusations, which is what kept this going.
Right.
He never successfully turned in any actual communists, yet he ruined the lives of thousands of people with false accusations.
Yeah.
So these people in our story, these people living in Chinatown, are the people that are really being affected by this fear-mongering.
And Lily more so than any other character, because of a lot of the other lesbians that we meet in this book are white. And still, even though they are like a minority in that they're gay, they are also white, and they also have biases and racial comments and views that like get brought up. So Lily, with the intersection of like at the time being Chinese and all having that set of persecutions on one hand coming from outside sources like the government and everyday life, like people she meets, also has this sexuality, like where these two cross sections of her identity are coming together, which makes her even more vulnerable at the time for like one being perceived as like I don't want to say a traitor, but like a possible threat to American society just for being Chinese. But then it's like you're going to layer on this other layer of like things that are being persecuted. I can understand why her parents, reacted the way that they did. I'm not saying it's right, but it's like you get it.
Yeah, they're scared.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and Eventually, McCarthy does get censored by the U.S. Senate.
Censured?
Censured?
No, not censored.
Whatever, however you say it.
I'm gonna make you watch C-SPAN.
Okay, great. In 1954, which takes away his credibility, takes away his power to do all of this, but he never faces any consequences. And in our book, this has not happened yet.
Right.
So, at the pageant, we're in the prologue, they're watching these beautiful teenage Chinese girls walking up on the stage. And basically, Shirley is just really enthralled by this. And she is talking about how she's going to be doing this one day. And we have a moment with Lily where one of the girls' feet kind of slips out of her shoe. Lily is noticing the round pinkness of her bare heel and the intimate arch of her foot and her toes flexing, and Lily has to avert her eyes because she feels like she's watching a woman undress in public. And nobody else is even noticing.
Right.
And Lily, unaware that she's gay, she's like a younger girl at this point.
Yeah, I think she's only 13.
Yeah, she's noticing these like very small, intimate details of a woman and feeling really kind of flustered by it.
Yeah.
And she ends up with this shrinking feeling inside of her as if she shouldn't be caught looking at these women.
Right.
She's experiencing a shame almost. So that's where we start.
Yeah. This little prologue gives us so many clues like about what's to come and like the foreshadowing with the pageant and the different personalities between Shirley and Lily. Like the prologue gives so much. And I feel like it's like almost like an outline to the book. So I was excited. After I read the prologue, I was like, I'm in. I'm ready. Let's go.
Yep.
So yeah, after the prologue, we fast forward to Shirley and Lily's senior year in high school, and they work at Shirley's parents' restaurant. I almost said grocery store, but it's a restaurant. And this is where we meet this character named Tommy Andrews. We don't actually meet them. We meet them through a newspaper ad that like Lily sees, and it said that Tommy Andrews is a male impersonator, and that like is like piques Lily's curiosity, and she's just like, oh, this is interesting. And I'm not like drawn away from it. I'm not looking at it in disgust. So, and it also says that Tommy Andrews is performing at the Telegraph Club. She tears out the little paper, and it's like her first, from what we've read, her first like sign of disobedience of like taking this little thing home with her.
It's almost like a compulsion.
Yeah, she doesn't like know why she's doing it. She just knows that the way she feels while looking at this ad and, having this bit of rebellion, she's like, I am not shying away from this. But like, I also like have to do it. I have to learn more about this. Yeah. Like I said, like, I think her curiosity was like really piqued in like a good way that she was feeling it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But yet she also, I think she knows, she doesn't know why, but she knows that she can't let anybody else know that she's taking it, because she waits until Shirley is gone to help her mom and nobody's looking, and that's when she really quickly takes it. And so she feels as though there's something wrong with her doing this.
Yeah. Which is so sad.
Yeah, again, it's the shame. The shame comes back, and she doesn't know why the shame's there. She doesn't know what this is. She has this compulsion. It's all very confusing. But like, canon event, girl.
Oh, I know. I was reading more about this book, like the context and the history and about the author and everything, and something that like I didn't put together while I was reading it, but afterwards in reading all of it, I was like, oh my gosh. And it kept saying that this like ad of Tommy Andrews was like a signal of hope throughout the whole book. And like, I just found that really smart. It's like, it's her first act of rebellion. It's her first act of like knowing herself. And then it's like hope for her, like holding on to this ad or taking this ad, like gives her a little bit of hope, which also reminded me of The Devil Wears Prada. You
Mhm.
know, what's his name? Stanley Tucci plays him. Anyway, Stanley Tucci. And he talks about how this magazine, oh my God, it's Vogue. I'm sorry, guys, my brain's farting, but Vogue and The Devil Wears Prada, and how he would sit under his covers at night with a flashlight as a little gay boy, reading it and like feeling connection. And I was like, all of
Mhm.
this like makes sense. Where like closeted stories, while they're all different, they all follow like a similar theme. A lot of it has to do with shame, but a lot of it also has to do with finding something that gives them a bit of hope, gives you a bit of like understanding from outside of yourself to give you just that extra oomph to keep going, you know?
Yeah, you're not the only one.
Yeah. Feel like a little bit of community, a little bit of other people feel the same way as I do. I'm not alone.
Mhm.
So that's how I feel like
Exactly.
this first chapter or two really sets that up of like, yes, might be a scary path we're about to like go down, but there are other people on it too that we might find.
Yeah. And especially in a time like that where everybody's hiding.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you think about, okay, now right now we're in 2024 and I open my Instagram and it's Pride Month, it's June. So there's rainbow posts advertising all sorts of Pride events and I go outside and if I drive long enough, I'll probably see a pride flag because I live in LA. And oh, I was walking with my girlfriend on Saturday, and a man leaned out of his car, slowed down, stopped, and he said, "Happy Pride," and then kept driving.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
cute. That was not where I was expecting that to go, and I'm so glad it
And
went that
us
way.
too. We like stopped and like
Like
unheld
scared.
hands. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we were like,
Oh.
oh, that was so sweet. And so
That No,
we
literally the first time I was with my ex-girlfriend at the beach, like right at the beginning of our relationship, we were like leaving, so like gave each other a hug, and some guy in a fucking truck like yelled obscenities at us. And so when you were telling, and I was like, oh, and, like we like broke apart obviously because it was like jarring and also like felt really unsafe. At least to me
yeah,
it did, you know. And yeah, that's not where I was expecting your story to go, but like
right? Yeah,
that's
because that
literally
stuff
the
has happened to
cutest,
me too.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. But
Oh,
like
that makes
no,
me
this
happy.
was yeah, exactly. It was so sweet. But like my point being that right now in the period in time that we're at and in the geographical location that we're at,
Yeah.
um you don't have to look high and low to find somebody else that's gay
Yeah.
and having the same sort of experience that you are.
Yeah.
And it's pretty easy to seek it out if you
Yeah.
want to. But in that time, what are you going to do? Like it's so high stakes. It's scary. You could get in big trouble. You could I mean, we see what happens to these people in
Yeah.
this book and it's not good. And
Yeah.
in real life, people were losing their jobs. People were like real serious life consequences were happening to them for
Yeah.
being discovered as being gay or being suspected as being gay. And so people were hiding. You couldn't just find these people. You had to know where to look.
Right.
And then you had to be brave enough to actually go look there. And then once you looked, you had to be brave enough to choose to live as you felt that you are and step outside of what society has created for you.
Right.
And very few people were actually going to do that.
Yeah. And there were no role models. There were no gay people in media. I mean, there were, but they were hidden, right? Or it was like an if you know, you know situation. There was no one to look up to who had walked a similar path that you could say, oh, their life turned out well, or oh, this was accepted by these people, you know? And then, especially you add on the layer of like Chinatown, it's like even harder. And like I said in the very beginning, where you're going to face even more discrimination. So, oof, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and Melinda Lowe, on her website, the author of this book was saying that like in her research, she was really trying to find people, Asian people that were gay from that time, and she could not find them. There were only any kind of historical counts of white people and like occasionally black people.
Right.
And it was just the history that the LGBTQ history got so whitewashed. And that does not mean that the people of color in the LGBTQ community did not exist. It meant that they got wiped from history.
Exactly. We don't have their stories, and their stories are going to be so different from like the white closeted gay experience in the 1950s. Because, and not to say like, you know, it wasn't bad for like white gay people, but it was worse for those people of color. And the fact that we don't have their stories is like a disservice to the entire community, honestly.
Yeah. So Melinda Lowe wrote this book to try and create her version of what that experience might have been for somebody that was Chinese and living that life in that time. So in chapter 1, Lily sees her first mask. She has her first mask sighting on the street. Which I just was so delighted by this.
I know.
Because she's like, there's something about her posture. That's intriguing.
She kind of walks like a man, but not like a man.
Yeah, and the way that Lily, like, out of everything happening on the street, like, that is what she picks out of everything. I'm like, oh yeah, girl, I see you.
Yep, I see you, little lesbian.
Mm-hmm. Yes, okay, chapter 2, we find out she has not only collected that picture of Tommy, she has a collection of pictures.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Not like I had an entire wall dedicated to Sandra Bullock growing up or anything like that.
Oh, you want to know what's embarrassing?
Yes.
My bedroom walls. Okay, actually, you wanna take a stab at who was covering my bedroom walls?
Okay. Shoot, I feel like I should know this. Am I gonna get? Is it Joe Jonas? So like literally a Jonas brother?
No, not a Jonas brother.
Okay, tell me.
Okay, the boys I liked legitimately all look like lesbians.
I know, same. Josh Hartnett is literally so lesbian coded. It's crazy.
I do not know who that is.
Oh my God, we've reached that point in our episode. Okay, look at, you know what? I'll show you a picture. But also, like, who was your favorite NSYNC person?
Girl, that was before my time.
Oh my God, JC Chazé, the gay one. I was like, his eyes are so blue.
I had Niall Horan.
Oh, okay, I was spot on.
Harry Styles, Justin Bieber, and Josh Hutcherson.
Those are literally the most lesbian coded men ever.
I know, and
they look like baby masks.
Covered in them.
Wait till I show you a picture of young Josh Hartnett.
Wait.
Is that not the funniest?
Kind of looks like the boyfriend, Rory's boyfriend in Gilmore Girls.
Maybe he is. But do you see how this looks like a masked lesbian?
Yeah, I do.
I thought he was just the cutest boy.
He is a cute boy.
Like the really like pretty boys. You were like, okay, I could get behind that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All my crushes in actual school in real life.
Girls.
You know, I'm not gonna hurt their feelings, these boys' feelings, by saying they looked like lesbians, but
Oh my God. I remember my first, this is bringing back a memory, my first grade crush. And I remember his name and everything. Baby Mask lesbian, 100%. He looked like Josh Hartnett with that swoopy hair. Literally this little first grade boy. I can see his face. I'm not going to say his name on the podcast.
Someone sends it to him. He's like,
he'd be like, yeah, Lauren, I know.
I saw my future. This is how I saw my big break happening.
Being called a mask lesbian in first grade.
Man, oh my gosh, my shirt is
it dripping sweat?
Wet. Yeah, it's really hot in here.
Okay, let's chug along then. Let's get through at least the first part.
Okay, so yeah, she has collected these photos of various women that she has felt this like inexplicable urge to collect. Like this, she's drawn to them for whatever reason that she cannot explain, but it's strong enough that she had to keep them, and she's hiding them inside of her textbook.
This like captured the little girl closeted experience so well, especially when you don't even realize it yet. Like you don't even realize it yet, and then you look back or you're like reading this and you're like, oh, I did all that too. But also one thing she did have was a clipping of two women who opened their own airfield after World War II, and they were like holding hands, and she felt like she needed it, but she just ripped it out instead and like kept it. And I'm just like, girl, that's so cute. And like also like a little foreshadowing because Kath like wants to get her pilot's license, and it's cute. Chapter 5, she's thinking about the Telegraph Club. She stops at a drugstore and she finds this book called Strange Season about two women. And I have a note. This is when I start taking notes. I took like 7 notes total because I just couldn't do it. I was just listening. But I said, so she's reading this like story of a lesbian in a lesbian magazine. And she's like right at this passage where they're like about to kiss, but then a noise gets made and she has to like put it back and like run out the store. And I said, Lily reading the lesbian magazine and then having to stop because she heard someone reminds me of Haylie watching Disobedience at the library. But like literally she's reading this and she's 17, right? So she's reading this and it's like this story about these two women and their love affair and everything. And she's just like into it. She's so into it. She's never read anything like this. And that's what I mean about like, there were no stories for these people to like know or hear. So no wonder they felt so alone, being like, am I the only one who thinks about this? But then to like see this in print, again, it's like a motivating factor for her to like continue to learn more and like seek out what this world is, because obviously there are other people in it, right? And she thinks she should feel ashamed for reading this, but she like literally doesn't. And like credit to her and like her self-growth in this book, because her recognizing that she should feel shame but not feeling it is like makes me so happy, because I'm like, good job. Like obviously your parents like instilled a good sense of self into you, and we see it later too where she like refuses to renounce like who she is. But I'm glad that like she didn't give in and like put it back and never touch it again, you know? But also in the chapter, I also have a note. So she goes home and she like is in bed at night thinking about this book, like replaying it in her head. And she like, I'm pretty sure like masturbates for the first time. The book really made it seem like she hadn't done this before, but I really enjoyed the way this was written. And I was like, I literally wrote down, that was a hot masturbating scene. I don't find those scenes to be necessarily like hot or like, I don't know why. Maybe it's just like my own hangups. But this one, I was like, the way that was written was like hot. I was not expecting that. I don't know. What about you?
I don't remember this scene.
Are you kidding me? Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Whatever. I think I just described it really well. So anyway, she's very turned on by this book. And yeah, okay, go ahead. Chapter 6.
Also, this book, I think she at first does not realize that like it was made by men for the male gaze.
Sure. Well, also, it wasn't just that. But do you remember a couple episodes ago where I said like all of our lesbian characters have like tragic endings?
Yeah.
Okay, we find out that she gets to read this later and it does have a tragic ending, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But then you realize, there were like laws in the publishing that said like you have to have them be punished in the end for like in these literary pieces about lesbians, they had to at the end be punished, right?
Yeah.
And you came across that in your research?
She said,
Haylie's flipping through her 15 pages of printed out 8.5 by 11 notes.
Melinda, made this note in the back of the book and said, lesbian books in corner stores for the male gaze, but lesbians found them too. Despite the publisher's requirement due to obscenity laws that these books end in punishment for the homosexual characters, they still created a kind of imagined community for lesbians scattered across the nation who could read these books and discover that people like them existed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy. But and that like carries over even after the obscenity laws are like done with. We still see in media tragic lesbian stories. Not as much as we see with like gay men's stories, but like, Portrait of a Lady on Fire is incredibly sad. Disobedience is pretty sad. I love Imagine Me and You as whitewashy and like romantic comedy as it is. They have a happy ending. So it's like we still see the repercussions of these viewpoints carrying over even into today's media, which is like we forget how close we are to this time. It's been less than 100 years.
Yeah.
It's only been what, 70 since this time?
Yeah.
60 since Stonewall. Like it's crazy how close we are to these viewpoints. We're like 2 generations, which tells us also like, again, how lucky we are to live in LA in this bubble and how it is not the same elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's crazy. Okay. Chapter 6. I noticed a lot. I was really intrigued by all of the little like cultural things that they were saying in here. So I noted, although there were always new immigrants from China showing up at school, they were relegated to Americanization classes and didn't interact much with the American-born Chinese kids. And so here again, we have this really big emphasis put on being American. You do not want people to think that you don't like America or you don't agree with America. And it's an interesting contrast to me to this idea of a free country. Because these people in particular they can't act freely.
Right. This and the pageant is where, have you seen shirts that say like, not your model minority?
Maybe.
Because it's like a big thing in the like Asian community is not your model minority. And these pageants and this like not legislation. I forget how like these types of classes and things came to be. It could have been legislated. I'm not sure. But that was like them trying to make Asian Americans be a model minority. Like that term was used a lot. And that is what I think she's like trying to reference with these types of parts in the book,
Yeah, that makes
and how
a lot of
Shirley,
sense.
and how like Shirley is this representation of model minority.
Yeah. Yeah, and I looked into what these Americanization classes were.
Oh.
Because I was like, is this okay, we had a student in my grade that moved from South America in 4th grade.
Okay.
And I was like, well, was it like that where like she didn't speak English yet, so she just went for like a couple hours of the day to get some extra help with English and like her schoolwork, or was it like something else going on here, right? So, which I figured it was probably something else, and I was right.
Yeah.
These were classes taught. It was a separate school. These classes were exclusively taught in English. Despite these people coming over only were speaking Chinese at this point
Oh
for
my
the most part,
God.
right? So they would often put students in a first grade level or in special ed classes, regardless of age, because they weren't passing their literacy tests in English.
Well, duh.
Yeah. Because it was a language that they didn't yet speak.
Right.
And they were punished for speaking their own languages. So that's what these Americanization classes were, that these new Chinese immigrants were being relegated to, separate from the American-born Chinese kids. Which it doesn't really appear that Lily knows this, which is interesting. And also in the book, we see that like really Lily and the other American-born Chinese kids don't ever have much interaction with kids that were like had immigrated over from China.
Right.
So that's really interesting, especially because it seems like the perception from other ethnic groups and like white people in San Francisco were that everybody in Chinatown doesn't speak English. Everyone in Chinatown speaks Chinese and they all know each other.
Oh,
like
yeah.
basically, yeah, anytime Lily goes anywhere, they're like, oh, look, there's a Chinese girl here. Do you speak English? Or they would say, does she speak English? They would ask someone else for her. And then they would say like, oh, do you know so-and-so?
Yeah.
Which is assuming that she knows everyone.
Yeah, which is so funny too, because that still happens. I don't know if you get that, but like, oh, my friend is gay. Do you know her? And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't know every gay woman in 100-mile radius of me. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's so silly, but it's still born out of like ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, oh, your world must be so small. And it's like, no, it's not actually.
Yeah. So that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Though I like the way that Melinda wrote this, because if you aren't really paying attention to that, like she writes it kind of subtly.
Yeah.
You could miss it if the reader isn't in tune to things like this, it could go over their head.
100%.
And that's really interesting to me.
It's super subverting. I do like the nuance and the subtlety in this book where it's like, again, it's like that if you know, you know. If you've been part of this community, you've experienced something like this. That's why you can recognize like microaggressions and like I'd be like, oh, I've seen that before towards myself. Or I've seen that happen to like my mask friend, be treated this way because of the way they present, or you know what I mean? But like, just if you haven't experienced it, it's likely to go over your head because it is nuanced to like an oppressed group of people,
Mm-hmm.
So I think chapter 6 is when Will and Lily and Shirley go to this picnic, which becomes kind of a bit of a focal point and like place of contention in this book. Because Shirley is like, they act different at this picnic, Shirley wants to like hang out with the older boy, which is Will's brother. His name is Calvin, who doesn't really become a huge character in the book, but a necessary one for a lot of the storylines. And Lily meets people who are, students from China, and now they can't go home because of the political climate with like the Chinese Communist Party and then like the Nationalist Party. It's like all this conflict, and they like aren't allowed to go home because probably the government has taken their papers, which is what happens to Lily's dad. He's a doctor, and the FBI like questions him. He gets caught up in this Red Scare because they think one of his patients is a communist, and they take his documents, like his paperwork to become a citizen. They take him away. So we see like the persecution happening. We see like real life consequences and things that happened to Chinese immigrants happening to Lily and her family, which obviously invokes panic and fear among the family. And then we find out that this like picnic was also used as like a meeting for this like communist group, which again, they're age-wise, end of high school, early college people in this book, which are like normally the core of like revolutions and forward social thinking, right?
But they were accused of being communists, but they claim that they're not communists, that they're they're a leftist.
Right.
But that's like not okay either in this time to be
Right.
at all leaning left. Like you have to be conservative.
Yes. So they go to this picnic and it gets back to Lily's parents and they're like, Lily, you can't ever associate with like that group anymore. We already lost our papers. Like we're already a target. We're already on the radar. Like you have to like chill, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go forward a little bit and we're at school and they get put in this group. And this is where we meet Kath. And Kath is the same age as Lily. They've been in school together pretty much since they were like 8. But they don't really know each other really well because Kath is white. And Kath is also like really interested in sciences and airplanes and like all these things. And they get put in this group. And Shirley's like such a brat about Kath and like what she likes and everything. And also Kath kind of comes to Lily's defense when Lily says like, oh, her dream was to be an astronaut. And Shirley's like, you're so silly. Like, we're going to get married and have babies and blah, blah, blah. And Kath is like, well, I want to fly airplanes. And so it's like, again, that sense of community comes into play of like, oh, you're different. I don't know how you're different, but you're different. And I am different. So let's be friends kind of thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Shirley's been trying to convince Lily that she should go to the dance with Will.
Mm-hmm.
And Lily just really does not want to do that.
No.
And she has this voice inside of her head that sounds an awful lot like Shirley asking, what harm will it do to go with him? But she can't bring herself to say yes.
Yeah. And he asks her, and she like literally panics and like runs to the bathroom. And I loved this scene. I feel like I know it's a good book when I can like see it as a movie in my head. She runs to the bathroom, she sits down on the toilet and like drops her book bag. And this picture falls out of her book bag, which is Tommy Andrews, the little clip. And there's someone in the stall next to her, and it happens to be Kath. And she like hands it back to her, but like knows about the Telegraph Club, but then like also saves, quote unquote, saves her from Will because she goes out and is like, oh, like she's on her period. Like such girl solidarity in that moment.
Yes.
And like I just thought it was such a cute moment where it's like, yeah, this might not actually happen, but like also it definitely could. And you're just like, oh, that's so sweet. Like, it's nice to see that like little bit of community already happening between these two. And yeah, they like become fast friends after this.
I feel like, yes, there's such opposition happening, like from out in the hall to in the bathroom, because out in the hall, this voice inside her head is not hers. And it's like she has so many outside influences that are telling her that are speaking over her own voice. That's like her own identity. That are telling her who she is and that she's a good Chinese girl and she's an American and she's not a rocket scientist. She's not a homosexual. It's doing harm to herself.
Yeah.
Like that's doing harm to who she is at her core. And then she goes into this bathroom and Kath is there. And all of a sudden, like, it's like somebody is speaking truth to who she is.
Yeah.
You know, like the friend of Dorothy?
Yeah. Which
that's like what Tommy Andrews is.
Right.
In this context. Like, it's like gay code, right? Like you're saying you're a friend of Dorothy, but
can you explain that reference? Because there might be people that don't know it. And I'm actually very impressed, Haylie, that you know this reference.
I know it because of Shannon Beveridge's brand.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. She made a shirt that said Friend of Dorothy on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Basically, like, I don't know what the time period was, but maybe it was back.
I'm pretty sure it's around this time.
Lavender Scare. Yeah. In order to identify other lesbians, women would say like, "Oh, are you a friend of Dorothy?" And if they said yes, that mean like, "Yeah, I'm gay as well." And that's how they would identify each other.
It's also referencing Judy Garland as like Dorothy in Wizard of Oz. That's so cute.
So it's like Tommy Andrews is Dorothy in this context, and she's saying like, "Oh, I've seen Tommy Andrews before." She's offering, that's such a bold move too. But she's giving her this opening, and it can feel really scary to let somebody know that you're gay, but like in this context, it's higher stakes.
Yeah.
And you have to say it without really saying it, and still in a way that you make sure that like it can seem like a mistake if it's not taken well or if it's not received well, but like they get it.
Exactly.
They are feeling it,
I mean, I'm just gonna say it again. It's so much of if you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you literally, no one's gonna believe you, and you cannot explain it to them if they haven't been through the same thing and understand it within the context. Like, it's so funny to me. It's so interesting. I have like references, but I don't want to talk about it. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah. Well, this marks a big shift in their relationship.
Oh, for sure. It's like the start of it.
Yes. Yeah. This, I liked this quote about it. It says, they had been in the same classes together for years, but it was as if they had been figurines in an automated diorama, moving on mechanical tracks that had approached each other but never intersected until now. Today, they had broken free from those prescribed grooves, and Lily was acutely aware of the unprecedented nature of their new friendliness.
Cute.
Yeah.
I just feel like when you meet someone, whether it's like romantic or platonic or whatever, but like they're in the same community as you have like an instant connection and deeper understanding than you would just meeting somebody like who doesn't share similar identities as you. And I feel like that's what's happening with Kath and Lily right here. And it just like continues throughout the entire book. Okay, so this is where like Lily and Kath are like pretending not to know each other at school, but then they're like meeting up after school. And this is where they like describe like more of their like dreams and hopes and ambitions. And none of it involves men, which is very funny because like you juxtapose that with Shirley and it's like all about men,
Mm-hmm.
And they like go and eat like ginger ice cream. Like Kath is very open to like Lily's culture, which must feel so nice for Lily,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they are still playing it very safe.
Yeah, they haven't even mentioned the Telegraph Club to each other.
It's Lily describes this as like an invisible chain linking her and Kath together. The newspaper clipping.
Yeah.
And that she can every once in a while hear it clinking faintly, but that neither one of them are acknowledging it. And it's like they're navigating the waters of playing it safe in a world where it is not safe to be gay, and trying to figure out if the other is to be trusted.
Yeah, you have to be so careful.
Mm-hmm. And even though I think they both can tell that they can trust the other one, that's so scary to be
I know. Yeah, to be the one that says it first and then be faced with that possibility of rejection or disgust or them telling someone else even, But like in this chapter, their like hands are like kind of touching and they like touch for like an extra second longer. And it's like no one on the outside would catch that. Yeah. But those two experiencing it are like, oh, like what is this? And they're both like not pulling away. It's just like the start, very cute, just like testing the waters. And it was cute to read about.
Yeah, so then we have a dance coming up. That's what Will had asked her to. And she rejected him. Shirley's upset about that. And Shirley is like kind of in charge of making this dance happen. And Lily ends up being in charge of the drinks so that she doesn't have to go with Will. And she can just like go early to the dance to be in charge of the drinks, whatever. But Shirley notices that Lily goes missing for a little bit. And this was when Kath shows up.
Yep.
And Lily and Kath disappear and go on a walk together. Because Lily was feeling quite overwhelmed by the dance inside. So they go on a walk, and Shirley sees them walk back in together and tells Lily that it is so important that she understands that she cannot be associated with people like that.
Yep.
And that if she knows what's good for her, she'll make up with Will. And she talked to Will earlier. He's willing to dance with you, and that would be a good idea just in case anybody saw her earlier with Kathleen.
Yeah.
And so Lily then finds out that Shirley knows that Kathleen is associated with a homosexual who is Jean. Kathleen's best friend, who was older and had graduated like a year or two before. She's at university now, Berkeley, but
of course.
And Jean had been caught kissing a girl in the band room.
Yep.
And just power of association with something like that was enough to, like, this is like at this point, second degree association is enough that Shirley is like, that will ruin you, and you need to go like dance with a boy in order to undo that, and like do not associate with this girl anymore.
Right. Yeah. And on their walk too, like, it's interesting for her to come back to that energy and that type of reaction to just being seen with Kath, because while they're on their walk, this is when they first talk about the Telegraph Club together. It's like the first like verbal confirmation with each other that they're both interested in the same kind of taboo space, because Lily brings up Tommy Andrews again, and Kath is like, well, I've been there. I've seen her perform. And then they talk about getting fake IDs, because Jean can get them fake IDs. And they're like, okay, like, we'll go next weekend. And then they walk back into this other, like, you know, I love how she puts these things up against each other, because they're talking about the Telegraph Club, which is this bar dance space, right? And then they go into like their school dance where everything is supposed to be normal and right and correct, but she's met with such like vitriol there. And then when she goes into the Telegraph Club, she's met with such acceptance, but also some racism. So it's interesting to see these two different spaces and how they function in this part of the story. Because one hand, she's coming in, she's so excited to go to this type of dance place. And then she comes back in to her actual dance at her school and is met with like rejection, basically. And it's like sad to see those put right back to back against each other.
Yeah.
Good
observation.
Oh my God. Thank you.
You're welcome. That made me so sad for Kath too.
I know, because like Shirley makes Lily go back to the drinks, and Kath is like, just leaves because she feels like really unwanted. And that's what I mean about Shirley. How dare you make Kath feel like that? This little baby butch lesbian, leave her alone.
I know. Yeah.
It's going to be harder for her.
Yeah. She's very mean girl in that moment.
Yeah.
In a lot of moments, but especially in that one.
It's the worst. It's literally the worst. I'll never not bring in a Taylor Swift reference, but she has this line this might be a little bit of a tangent, but she has this line in her song Clara Bow where she says, it's hell on earth to be heavenly. And I think about that with like butch lesbians or like the transgender community. I'm like, they're so like heavenly, and like they are so themselves, and like, you know, go through a lot of different type of discrimination, but they're so wonderful when you know that community. And it's like it's hell on earth for those people because they're like so otherworldly, and that's like what it made me think of. And the type of, especially even in the 50s, to be like a butch lesbian, or with Tommy Andrews, where it's like, is Tommy actually trans? Right? Like, not a lot of the male impersonators at the time, or like drag kings, were trans men who, like, there wasn't a term for that, and there wasn't a space to even be that. And like the extra discrimination that they get makes me like, oh, it's awful, because they really are like some of the best people among us.
Yeah.
Ugh. So very sad little part of the book in part 2 here. Yeah, but Shirley just has this terrible reaction. And the next day, she doesn't even walk to school with Lily. Like you were saying, it's so Mean Girl-esque to be like, I don't approve of your actions, so I'm going to take away my acceptance and like love for you, because it's so conditional.
Yeah. Also, Shirley, it seems, kind of holds a lot of social power at school.
Yeah.
And she wields that, and she knows that. And so she has like pointed the weapon of social
pariahism.
Yeah, like at Lily, because she's mad at her. And so, I mean, like, high school friend breakups are the worst.
Especially if you're a little gay girl.
Yeah. So also Lily, oh my gosh, I so fell for her, because she's just like this sensitive little people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
And she is talking about how, like, okay, her and Shirley rarely fight, but like when they did, Lily felt like the petty one who was like clinging to her bruised feelings for too long, because Shirley never held a grudge and was so generous and big-hearted, and everybody sided with her. And now Lily is realizing, oh, Shirley actually has never apologized for anything, and just like assumes that everyone's going to forgive her, and everyone just does.
Right.
And that this is where Lily is really kind of figuring out, like, oh, Shirley's not sitting well with me anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't really know if I want to be in Shirley's presence, actually.
Yeah. I think something that happens when you start to re-examine your identity, even at a young age like this, when you start to see that the world has different possibilities and more possibilities than what you previously thought. So she's starting to question her sexuality. What else is she going to question? Right? That's when you start questioning almost everything in your life, being like, wait a second. If I thought that I was, let's say I thought I was straight for so long, what other things could I possibly be wrong about that were just outside influences versus what I actually think? Mm-hmm. Right? And that's exactly what she's doing. That's exactly what you just explained, where she's like, do I even like Shirley? Like, I'm putting all this evidence together of like what a friend should be or what I would want in a friend. And like, she's not meeting these things. So why do I want to like be around her? But again, she's wielding so much social capital that it's like, you got to pick and choose sometimes where you're going to give.
Right. Yeah. And I think that exactly what you're saying is probably a big player in why some people get so scared when somebody in their life that they're close to decides to come out or make a change in their life or anything of that sort, because there's that fear of getting left behind. Like, oh, what if they, find out that they were wrong about me or whatever. And sometimes that's right. And sometimes like if you're actually like a good supportive person to them, then hopefully that's not right. And like they know that and they stand by you. But in Shirley's case, she's not really a good supportive person that stands by Lily. Like she really kind of will just throw Lily to the wayside whenever she doesn't have a good use for her. Like
Mm-hmm.
Lily, it's very transactional, and it's not that she's ever really giving anything to Lily. It's she's using Lily all the time.
Yeah. And I think that's a common experience. And I think it's a common experience for everyone, but it's also just a common experience in like the queer community too, where it's just like you have these friends that like you're not actually getting anything from. You're putting into the relationship, but you're not getting anything out. It's because maybe they aren't as evolved yet. Shirley hasn't questioned anything she's been told or anything in her life because it's working for her. Right.
Mhm.
And then you're met with somebody who is now in opposition to those beliefs that you so firmly held. And you literally don't have the context to deal with that or like the capacity to deal with that because it would upend your entire worldview to be like, oh, let me look at all of the world through this different lens. And people cannot do that. It fucks with their reality just way too much. And they're like, no, 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 too different. And I feel like that's where Shirley falls in this story. So we end part 2 where we're just about to go to the Telegraph Club. We have Lily's relationship breaking down with Shirley. We have Lily's relationship growing with Kath. We have this ominous, overarching red scare, lavender scare happening. It's like all these things are starting to come together, but we don't have like a real picture yet of what's going to happen. Part 3, it was interesting because that part 2 was like labeled Grace, which is Lily's mom. But I don't know if we got like a ton of insight into Lily's mom other than like she was a nurse and she had to come over and they had always talked about going back to China. Joseph and Grace, who are Lily's parents, like talked about going back home to China. But then when like the Communist Party broke out and there was like all this conflict, they like couldn't. And so we see like her mom trying to like rectify like American with being Chinese and like but other than that, I don't feel like we get a lot of her character, even though this part was like labeled Grace.
I think what I got from the parts that were written from her perspective was, like the concept of like, I'm just a girl.
Yeah.
My girlfriend was like talking about this to me the other day about like
I would
how
love to know what she thinks.
yeah, everyone's moms are just a girl. They're like,
Oh,
yeah,
I've had that realization too. I like called my mom.
yeah, and I loved that. I think that was so astute of her, and yeah, like Lauren, you're just a girl. My mom's just a girl.
It's crazy.
Everyone's moms are just a girl, and like they all have their own lives, and they're all feeling things, and they're living life for the first time.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening to Grace, Lily's mom, is she is just a girl living this life for the first time, and it is throwing these wild curveballs at her that she is just doing her best to deal with, and it is not going the way that she planned. And now what is she supposed to do with that? And she found this boy that she really likes, and now she has these kids with him. And I think really like what her perspective did was give me a lot more empathy for her moving forward into the story, knowing like now knowing what happens with her and the way that she reacts to Lily. I think it would have been very easy to see her as this terrible, like unfeeling villain.
Right.
Not had that perspective earlier in the book.
Yeah.
And now we know who she is, how she thinks, how she sees the world, and man, she's trying her best and she's scared.
She's so scared. She's scared for her husband. She's scared for her daughter. Like, and she just, again, she is just a person trying to navigate. I try and get my girls to understand that. And I feel like we don't give moms enough credit in that area. And it is easy to see Grace as like a villain, which she's not, because villain is a very one-dimensional caricature of someone. Like, obviously, her beliefs and things come from a whole worldview and perspective. And she really is just operating out of fear. And when you operate out of fear, you're going to hurt people. There's just no way around it. But part 3, we go into Joseph's story, which is Grace's husband and Lily's dad. And we like flashback to like 9 years previous. So this would have been the end of World War, or the start of World War II. I'm sorry, I don't know where the battles took place, but like they were obviously very affected by the war, and he was very affected by the war. But
he fought for the Americans, and that's how he got naturalized as a U.S. citizen.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Yes.
You said that much more concisely. But yeah, they talk about more of Joseph and Grace, and they give this like little story about them, you know, going to a Chinese nightclub, which I thought was fun, and how, you know, they had a sweet relationship and then their whole world just got upended. And it like humanizes and gives more dimensions to these kind of outlier characters who are going to have some pretty big reactions to Lily coming out and Lily not denouncing her sexuality to them. And we get a little bit more context into why they're acting the way they are and what their experiences have been that lead them to these reactions.
Speaking of historical context, and since we're about to enter the Telegraph Club, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe I can get into a little bit of that.
Please do. Let's go.
So the Lavender Scare, also happening in the 50s. We've already talked a little bit about this.
Yeah.
But in 1951, there was a court case called Stuman versus Riley, and the California Supreme Court ruled that homosexuals have the right to public assembly, for example, in a bar. But
this was federal?
This was in the California Supreme Court.
Oh, okay. Oh, good.
But even after this case, bars were still getting raided, and alcohol licenses were getting taken away and people arrested. So,
and if you take a liquor license away, that's taking away their income.
Yeah. Their livelihood gone.
Gone.
So, also their reputations destroyed.
Oh, yeah.
Community, like, yeah. So, open homophobia and transphobia was the norm in this time, and police were charging bar owners with things like furnishing marijuana to minor girls and lewd and indecent conduct. And the police would also find things like cocaine kits in bars, and then the media would print really scary things to rile up the public. And then they would get young girls to testify against the bar owners by threatening to try them as adults if they didn't. So this actually, we see this happen later in the book, but
yeah,
that was based off of a real raid at a place called Tommy's Place, which, interestingly enough, because we have Tommy Andrews in this book, but yeah, that was a real bar, a gay nightclub in San Francisco in the 1950s called Tommy's Place. And a raid like this happened after
it was so common
case had already happened, you know, so like they were legally allowed to be there.
Right. I mean, even Stonewall, the reason the riot happened is because there was just raid after raid. And that's like 10 years later, 10 plus years later. Like, just because something is legalized, who is going to enforce this? If the cops are the ones raiding the gay bars, who is going to persecute the cops for breaking the law? No one.
Right. Yeah. And then, so they're coming up with these charges that like are technically not for the thing that they're actually going in there for, which is like being gay, because they can't actually charge them with that since that's not illegal. They're going in there with the charges for the like lewd conduct and like supplying illegal drugs to minors and stuff like that, which they have no proof of, and they're planting things, but that's what they're doing. So that is what is taking place. We have 5,000 to 10,000 gays are estimated to have lost their jobs in the government. which, like we talked about earlier, they were found, or they were getting fired from government jobs because they were thought to be more susceptible to blackmail and therefore security risks.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually Bill Clinton in 1995 that signed an order saying that sexual orientation is not a reason to restrict security clearance. So, yay, Bill Clinton. Yeah. But then we are having these problems. There's Stonewall, and then it's not until 2003 that the last states legalize intimacy between same-sex couples. And then, of course, in 2015, we have gay marriage gets legalized. Yep. So that's kind of a brief overview.
Yeah. And just to add to that, it wasn't until 2023 that gay men could even give blood donations.
Right.
Like they had been barred from that for a very long time because literally just being gay, they couldn't give blood at all, like literally restricted. That's so crazy. So obviously there's still a lot of work to be done, but yeah, Haylie, thank you for doing all that research.
Yeah,
it provides so much context.
Yeah, we also had a couple of presidents, like early 1950s. So Harry Truman, he enacted the first sodomy law in DC that established a 10-year in prison penalty or a fine of up to $1,000 for sodomy, which that included gay people as like sexual psychopaths. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then in 1950, we have gays or all other like people that are included under the sodomy category are restricted from being in the military. And then we have in 1952 the Immigration and Nationality Act, vetoed by President Truman, which the bill was supposed to prohibit aliens afflicted with a psychopathic personality, epilepsy, or a mental defect from entry into the United States. And the Congress would later override his veto and implement the act into law. So that's a little like, that's what the beginning of the 1950s were looking like. And then in 1953, Eisenhower signs an executive order that lists sexual perversion as a security risk. So that is grounds for termination or denial of employment. So,
okay, but I do have to mention another president, which would be Teddy Roosevelt, because he had a daughter named Alice Lee Roosevelt, who was a wild child and very rumored to be a little bit gay. And so she used to like smoke on the White House roof. Like he was like, I can't control Alice. I can either run the country or control Alice. You guys pick. And that was like early 1900s. And like, it's just funny to see like certain crossovers where it's like, while we're legislating these things, the president's daughter was hooking up. Like, and everyone knew it. She was like a socialite. It was a whole thing. Her like only child came from an affair like on her husband, who was like the Speaker of the House. So it's there's so much fun gay pop culture stuff that I love reading about, but not a great time legislation wise.
As they're going into the Telegraph Club, Lily has no idea that like that is the political climate.
Yeah.
And really neither does Kath.
No, but what's interesting is her parents obviously do, because they have a conversation. And if it was previously obviously in the book where they had this, where they're like, oh, those clubs, those bars are not like, they're not good. They're not okay, especially for Chinese girls. Right. So they obviously know that not only is it like taboo to go to these clubs, but it's even more taboo for these Chinese girls to go. And like, they obviously know the undercurrent here, but Kath and Lily, they're 17. They got no clue. No clue.
Yeah.
So they go to the Telegraph Club and they see Tommy Andrews perform. And this is like, I could just imagine Lily seeing this for the first time, just like jaw on the floor.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Turned on, but confused, but excited, but ashamed at her excitement. Like just going through the gambit of like gay panic emotions. And she also says she feels like self-conscious because she's like trying to imagine a woman's body under these men's clothes. And I loved that like imagery in my head because you're like, I'm attracted to like this masculine energy on stage, but I know it's a woman, and that's even better. And like imagining like a womanly figure under these like, I'm assuming more baggy clothes with probably like a mustache, like a whole thing, you know? And like how innocent and sweet she is. And it's like those innocent like thoughts to me, like it's not wrong, sweetie. Like it's okay. That's like what I want to say to her.
Yeah, the vibe that Tommy's giving off, like we all know someone like this. She's giving off
She's
Shane energy.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
But actually, wait. So there's a character in the L Word that comes up who is actually a drag king.
Okay.
Who this person reminds me exactly of. Like Tommy Andrews and the drag. I'm gonna Google the drag. What's his name? Is it Billy? No, that's the guy. Ivan. His name is Ivan.
Okay.
And he reminds me so much of Tommy Andrews in so many ways. And I can't wait to talk about that once we get there on our rewatch. But totally Shane vibes.
Oh, yeah.
As of right now. Yeah, so they like go there, and then after Tommy performs, Lily and Kath find a table. And I love this because it's like, this is still how like queer culture is, where it's just like, oh, you guys are gay too? Come sit with us. And they like meet these women named Paula and Claire. And this is when they like Lily first gets the like, does she speak English type thing, which is like ugh, so annoying. But and while it does suck and it's such a microaggression, these white bitches are dumb too. Like they don't know how that is coming off, and that does not excuse them. Do not get me wrong, but also like, come on, fucking get it together, girls. Don't ask that. Why not just talk to her? Have a conversation. But Lily, of course, handles it really well, which she doesn't have to, but she does.
She's pissed.
Yeah. And she keeps it pretty contained, which I feel like could be like more of a cultural thing. But also, like, this is also a place and a space that she wants to be in. So, and she's 17. So, like, what is she going to do? You know?
We also see, like, it's the earlier show. There's two sets, I guess it's the earlier set. And there's a lot of straight couples in there.
Yeah.
Or what we think. I mean, it's like,
sure. It's probably a lot of bi women and like straight men.
Exactly. So it's like the queerness quietly existing in here.
Right.
Like we have women that are like leaning into this and are like excited and are smirking at their husbands, but Lily feels really uneasy and like queasy about it. Like it feels kind of icky to her for whatever reason. And so I don't know. And I think we don't know because Lily doesn't know if they are like sexualizing and being gross about Tommy, or if they are queer.
Yeah. And it's probably more of the first one, in my opinion. And I think that's why it feels icky, is not necessarily sexualizing, but it almost is like, this is our space. And like, Tommy Andrews is not for you. Right? Does that make sense? Like, it's almost like when like a straight couple or like a perceived straight couple like comes to the gay bar and you're like, are we going to have a problem? Like, this is our space. And not that you can't be here, but like, why are you here? You know? And I feel like that's kind of what Lily was feeling. And it could be like that the straight couples were sexualizing her, but it also just to me felt like this is not like supposed to be for you. Kind of
it's
vibe.
Like they're being tourists.
Yeah, like look at this other culture that we can like gawk at. Even if we find it entertaining, we're not a part of it. I don't know. Maybe that's just from my experiences. I don't know. But that's kind of how I read that. But she did say there was one thing, and I was going to write it down, but I was driving and I'm going to try and recall it. But she said that they looked at each other and they knew something. And I was like, I wanted to be like, what did they know? What did they know? And I still haven't like answered that question.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's kind of what you were saying, where you're like, Lily doesn't even know herself.
Right.
Like what vibe is happening between these married couples.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that if we were getting this story from like a Paula perspective, one of these older women, then we would know.
Yeah.
Or we would have at least an assumption. But that's not the perspective that we're getting this story from, and we're getting it from a baby gay who's having her first entrance into the world. She's like a duckling coming into here, and so it's all very mysterious to her.
Right.
Um,
But talk about her second set, Tommy's second set, and like the contrast there.
Yeah, well, Tommy gets really like before she had really been performing like to these straight couples and like interacting with the men and like haha men like now it's different, and Tommy is changing the lyrics so that it's like she's singing to a woman or about a woman, and it's almost like this is more real.
Yeah, this is a more authentic performance.
Right.
It's a non-censored performance. Now it's not a like wink wink nod nod, if you know you know. Now it's a like, this is our culture and this is what we're doing. Because they're not there anymore to police them or, you know, anything like that.
Yeah. And now that it feels real, I think Lily is having kind of like a, oh God, this is real, and Tommy's real. Specifically, she is having to really grapple with the fact that Tommy is real and not a piece of paper in her textbook.
Right.
And in this quote that I have here, it says, in her imagination, Tommy had been like a matinee idol, sweet-faced and tender. In reality, Tommy was a woman made of flesh and blood, and that frightened Lily most of all. Because Lily had her on this pedestal and had also like made her into something that couldn't possibly be real. And making Tommy real made Lily's desire real.
Exactly. It's like, oh, wait. These like fantasies that I've had about this person, not necessarily this person, but what it invokes inside yourself, right? She's like, oh shit. Then it's not just something in my brain. It's something that I want to do or be or become or experience.
Yeah. It's like if you had this dream of opening a coffee shop and all of a sudden somebody was like, okay, well, I have an opportunity for you to open a coffee shop. Here you go. And you're like, oh, well, that's going to be a lot of hard work and that's really scary. And what if it fails? And like, what if this happens and this happens and this happens? It's like anxiety from inside out takes over, right? Oh. And that
coffee shop analogy is perfect. It's like you have this, no, literally perfect. Because like, oh, you have this dream and then someone's like, okay, here's the means to do it. And you're like, oh shit, is that actually my dream? Do I actually want to step into this?
Mm-hmm.
Such a good analogy, Haylie.
Thank you. I came up with that on the spot.
It made so much sense in my brain. Like, what a good way to describe that. So yeah, so Lily has this night at the Telegraph Club where she's like, not to quote Chapel Roan, oh my God, not to quote Chapel Roan, but standing face to face, like with herself and having to confront it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I did find the next day to be so funny. And like Lily is like begging to be seen. She's like, why didn't my family know I snuck out? She goes to school and she's like, I want Shirley to notice that I'm different now. And it's like, girl, you're exactly the same because no one knows what you're doing. Like, it was so funny to me. I was like, but also like so sweet because you're like, she just wants to be seen and known and loved.
Mm-hmm.
And the fear of those people closest to her dad, specifically her dad, and then Shirley, like not noticing anything different in her, like, or the fact that they could notice something different and then reject her is like soul crushing.
Yeah.
So it's like scary, but she's like, but maybe it won't be like that.
I have a couple more comments about her time at the Telegraph Club. Kath is saying to her, like, if you want to leave, we can go. Which, that's the constant protecting of others' comfortability that we do that is also self-protective for us.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's always this fear of thinking that we're like forcing somebody else into something that they don't want to do. And then that would put everyone in a really bad spot, right?
Right.
So Kath is really checking in on her. And I think part of it is like, yeah, she really cares about Lily and how Lily's feeling. And then the other part of it is like, she's protecting herself in that way too.
Yeah.
And she does this throughout the whole book up until they're really with each other, you know, where she's like really constantly checking on where Lily's at, because if she's moving at a different pace than Lily is, especially in this time period, then that could be like devastating to Kath. Not just like emotionally, but like for her life.
Right, because Kath is a little bit further in her like journey on her sexuality and herself. And so yeah, to like meet somebody who's just at the beginning of that journey, even if you're at the beginning too, but you know, she's already been to the Telegraph Club. She already took the risk. She already decided she wanted to go back. Like she's already confirmed to herself who she is. And for her to not know if Lily has done that internal work can be scary, because what if she's like, oh, it's just a phase and blah, blah, blah. Like it could be really hurtful for Kath to like open herself up to that.
Yeah. And then Lily, and this is so fair because Lily is so uncomfortable in this club. Like we literally have her getting beer on her hand and she's so uncomfortable that she just like stiff arms her hands down and lets it just rip off her hand instead of asking someone for a napkin or anything.
Yeah.
Because she says that nobody seems to be paying attention to her. So like, okay, why bother looking for a napkin or asking someone for help or anything, you know? So like she's so uncomfortable. She does not have a sense of belonging yet. And also a lot of the conversation of these women around her is just going over her head, and like they're talking about a movie that all of them have seen, or it seems like all of them have seen except for her. They're talking about this like French film called Olivia. And actually looked
Is this how you felt? Is this how you felt when you were a baby gay and everyone was talking about things?
Kind of, yeah. And I looked this up because I was like, is this real? There's no way this is real. In what it says in one scene, the women even kissed, and Claire was like, not really. The teacher kissed one girl on her eyes. And I'm like, seriously? Is that a real movie? Did they really make a lesbian movie and the girls couldn't even kiss each other? They had to kiss on the eyes? And I looked it up and yes.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's real.
In fact, I took a picture of it and I'll show it on the screen and I'll
describe it. You show it and I'll describe it.
I have to go through all my pictures of dogs. Okay, here it is.
Oh my God, it's black and white and she is kissing her on the eye. Wow. We should try it. Yeah, like last rites type situation. We'll post a link to this on our show notes because yeah. Wow, so interesting.
Yeah, so that's real.
Mm-hmm. But, and of course, Lily hadn't seen it.
Yeah, so that's how she felt in there. But
just kind of on the outs and not necessarily part of this community yet.
Yeah, but then regardless of like how outside of the community she felt, once she got out of it, she had this want to go back, and she wanted, like you were saying, she wanted her people to know that she was different. Like she felt different that she had been there.
Right. It's so hard because it's just like these two opposite feelings coexisting within your body. And how the heck do you sort that out?
I don't know. She says it's like finding water after a drought.
Yeah, and Claire, I think it's Claire who goes with her to the bathroom, who said she came from like some little city, and finding San Francisco and like the Telegraph Club felt like finding the promised land. And I think Lily is waiting to feel that. And I think she does get that later on in the book for sure. And that's kind of like that feeling of belonging and community and connectedness is what gives her the strength to not deny herself at the end. So
you have to have such a strong sense of self to not let it get knocked over by the people that you really care what they think of you.
Exactly. Oh, it's so hard into like, but I feel like it makes queer kids grow up faster. And like whether we can argue whether that's like fair or not fair, but it definitely helps them in the world like get that backbone that they're kind of going to need, or that we're going to need. Like I needed that backbone when that guy yelled obscenities like at me and my ex. I didn't even have it yet, right? Luckily she did. She had it and she was like, it's fine. Like don't even listen to them. Why do we care what they think? You know what I mean? But to me, it like broke me. I was like, I've never experienced like that before. And so like you need a backbone to exist in the world as a queer person, just in general. And then to add on to that, like I want to give props to Lily for being like a Chinese immigrant during the time where they were most persecuted. And then like, again, just like all those intersectionalities of her identity and her standing firm in it at the end is like inspiring. So yeah, it's a very big event. First Telegraph Club appearance, I should say, for not for Tommy, but for Lily.
Well, they have a drill for atomic bombs.
Oh
at
yeah,
school, which like okay, Lily also thinks this, but immediately I was like, "What's that gonna do?"
Literally nothing.
Yeah, you're laying on the ground in the hallway, girl. That atomic bomb's gonna get you.
Yeah, you're gonna die. No amount of covering your neck is going to fix that.
Anyway,
okay.
But
so they have this drill.
This was really sad because Lily was just like laying on the floor in the hallway next to Shirley, and she was thinking about how these drills are just happening year after year, and the enemy keeps changing, and it was Japan, and then Korea, and then China, but now it's the Soviets. And she had secretly welcomed their potential Soviet invaders because at least she'd never be mistaken for a Russian.
Oh, that reminds me of like, because it was the Koreans and then, or it was the Japanese, then the Koreans, then the Chinese, and now the Russians. And it's just how it makes me think of that really prolific poem that says like, first they came for, in this case, first they came for the Japanese and I didn't say anything because I wasn't Japanese. And then they came for the Koreans, but I didn't say anything because I wasn't Korean, right? And it goes all the way down. And then it's like, and then they came for me, but there was no one left to stand up for me, and it's like how she said the enemy is always changing. It's like, it's just another group of people. It's another like group of others that people can other to scapegoat, to blame for something, right? Yeah. And it's awful. And I hope we get to a place one day where there's not a group, but I mean, wishful thinking.
Yeah. This reminded me too of COVID and how everyone was like,
oh,
I mean, so here, I mean,
yeah, that was a repeat.
It's like pretty much anybody that's Asian is getting targeted because they could be mistaken for any of these Asian ethnic groups that are mistaken as an attacker, even though they're Americans born and raised in America and they're living their normal lives just like everybody else. And then COVID comes to the US and all of a sudden, same thing, these American citizens who are doing nothing but living their lives just like everybody else.
Just
they are
as scared.
They're under threat of the same exact virus that everybody else is, and they're getting attacked, and Asian hate crimes are going up because the virus originated in China. And it's just really horrible and awful. And we in the world live in cycles, and this is just another example of them.
It's a very real example of history repeats itself, because even before COVID, we had 9/11 and then all the hate crimes against Middle Eastern people. Like, it just continues and continues and continues. And, we say like never again, but then it just happens again, you know? It's rough. But I don't fault Lily for saying like, oh, I kind of welcome this, because at least then the discrimination isn't against me. And it's a kind of childish take, but again, she's 17, but also I don't fault her for that. That's just an internal human experience and feeling to be like, please, anybody but me. I don't want to feel this way. And it's not because she hates Russians. It could have been, Mexicans. It could have been Irish. It could, which are all groups that have been discriminated against. It's just please not me anymore.
Yeah, it's like a weight off her shoulders.
Yeah.
Racism in America. And that brings us right to chapter 24, where Uncle Francis is in the living room talking about von Braun. These are
the scientist.
Yeah, and I am going to butcher this name. I am so sorry. Dr. Sui Shen.
Oh. I'm like, that sounds good. Don't listen to me. I'm dumb.
Anyway, sorry. I don't know how to say it.
But there was a Chinese doctor who worked for the U.S. during World War II. Like an American, was he American, right? He worked for the U.S. military.
He worked for the U.S. and this is real.
Yeah, this is real.
All real. Yeah.
We took all the German scientists. We took all the Nazi scientists. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm very upset about this.
Basically, what happened is, the American government welcomed this former Nazi, and he had worked against the U.S. in the war. And then they still brought him in. They give him free reign over the Army's missile project. And he's totally free. And then this Chinese scientist is under house arrest. And he had worked for the US during the war on their missile projects, and he co-founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And yet he's under house arrest. And he was a Chinese citizen, but still helped out the U.S. And he's being accused of being a communist. So they think that he's spying, and he ends up getting deported eventually.
Yeah, and it just shows that nothing is going to protect you from racism. Nothing is going to protect you from people coming for you based on literally your ethnicity, because it doesn't matter to them. It's like, no, we need to blame someone, so you're it. Tag you're it. And it's so fucking frustrating, because here we're gonna take this Nazi who was responsible for literal hundreds, thousands of deaths, and we're gonna say oh, you're good, you're fine. But then this patriot who helped us defeat the Nazis is accused of spying and deported. What is that? This is where I feel like nationalism and everything just falls apart, because it doesn't actually work, Yeah. So.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, because then, so Lily's family is talking about this, and one of them says, I believe the American government is doing its best. And they're always saying stuff like this because they are afraid of being perceived as not supporting the American government.
Yeah. And there were spies, the government incentivized ratting on your neighbor. If you ratted someone out, you were safe. So it's like while they were talking about it, it was almost like in code of like, no, but we love America. But like it's not us. Like, no, even though they're like clearly disappointed in America. Right. So
yeah. I also thought it was really interesting. They, in the same conversation, they're talking about Aunt Judy's describing her and Joseph's mother, who's Lily's grandmother, who she had never met, but she was an influential member of the 1920s Shanghai Society and had been friendly with Sun Qingling, the wife of Sun Yat-sen. Also real people. And Sun Yat-sen was the president of the Republic of China. And yeah.
What?
Yeah, Sun Qingling was a political figure and his third wife. And so this would have made Lily's grandmother very influential if she was good friends with this woman, and probably would put Lily's family, I'm guessing, at an even higher level of scrutiny from the US government if they were involved at this high of a level with Chinese political figures.
Yes. And now that makes a lot more sense too, because gosh, Haylie, good job on all this research, because this is like connecting dots in my brain, because we see Grace reckoning at some point in the book with like kind of being friends with Shirley's parents, because if they were over in China, Grace and Joseph and Lily, they would all be at like a very high society role, and they wouldn't be friends with Shirley's parents. But because they're all perceived as the same as just Chinese, and like they're not, like they are put into the same community. It's super interesting. So yeah, this basically ends this chapter, this part 3 ends with like Lily asks her mom about if her dad's got her citizenship papers back, and he doesn't. And her mom is like still asking her, are you still hanging out with the Mansing organization, which is like the communist organization? And Lily's like, no. Which is funny because she's like, well, not that discriminated group, or like, hey, the group that, you know, not that persecuted group. But I am with this other one, but I'm not going to tell you. Oh, which is like, she's not lying, but she's also like kind of skirting around the whole thing, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, guys, that is the end of part 1. I hope you enjoyed all of Haylie's contextual insight and research. I can, like, part 2 of this series is going to be, I hope it's not longer, but it might be. It's so good. It gets so crazy.
It's so good. I will be giving less historical context because you already got it. So
That's
maybe
true.
It'll balance out.
That's true. That's true. Oh, but we have to talk about Judy, and we have to talk about Kath. We have to talk about the raid. We have to talk about Lily going to Tommy's apartment. I can't wait.
We cannot wait until you hear part 2, because this book was so good. I ate it up. And sorry to leave you all on this cliffhanger for a week, but whatever, gotta keep you coming. We love you all. We will see you next week. Thank you for joining us for last night at the Telegraph Club, and we'll see you next time.
Bye bye.